Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 2 of DocuMinded. Today we are talking about A Devil in Disguise, a season 2 episode of Cold Case Files. I would definitely be lying if I said that this is how I was introduced to this case, because I've known this case for a very long time. And even in the time that I have known it, so many changes have happened within those, 14, almost 15 years since I became aware of this case. And while it was on a show called Cold Case Files, I can tell you guys that there is a resolution to this case. Finally, after all of these years, all of these decades, there was a resolution, is a resolution. But let's start with some backstory. So, it's the day before Easter, 1960. And just like last episode, we're back in Texas, folks. But for this one, we're not in Katy, Texas. We are in a small little town called McAllen, Texas, which was near the Mexican-American border. We have this gorgeous 25-year-old woman. Her name is Irene Garza. She was a beauty queen. She was a teacher. She, if I remember correctly from the documentary I just finished watching, she was the first Mexican-American to win the beauty pageant that she was a part of. So it was a big turning point culturally for the area and for that competition. Obviously, they don't talk much about that because, well, this is about what happened to her. So, returning to the date, we have the day before Easter, 1960. This family, and Irene specifically, they were all very devout Catholics. So since this was the day before a holiday, especially it being the day before Easter, which is a very Catholic holiday, she decides that she's going to go to confession at the church. But by 11 o'clock, she's not back home yet. She has been gone. Nobody's heard from her. Nobody has seen her. They call the church. She's not there. So it takes many, many days. And I would say within this case, the 3 weeks surrounding this case, I feel like are very important and are almost the most important part of getting down to who did this, why, and getting a little bit of context as to why this person did what they did. And I'm sorry if you hear running. I am at home today, and my kitty cats are playing. So there's going to be some little kitty cat feet in the background making some noise. But we'll get back to the week before the murder happens, because that is one of these 3 very important weeks. Then we have the week that this does occur. Okay, honeys, let's chill out. We have the day that she goes missing. 2 days later, her shoe is found, thrown on the side of the road. The day after that, her purse is found. And then within 5 days of her being killed, her body is found in a canal. So this was a big agricultural area. And one of the ways that they helped the agriculture was these interconnected canals. So they were draining canals looking for her body. And within this time, I actually, just from watching this episode, learned a lot more information that I had not previously known. Before her body is found, cops get a call from a local bar where this very irate drunk man is bragging about having murdered Irene Garza. It ends up not being true. They end up finding out that he actually had nothing to do with it. Then a couple of days after that, the family actually gets a call from a woman claiming to be Irene, saying that she's at a hotel or at a motel being held against her will. She's been kidnapped and she's a town over. Cops decide to go and check this out, but it ends up being a hoax. And then on day 5 of the investigation of her disappearance, they find her body in the canal. She ended up dying from asphyxiation. She was suffocated. She was not strangled, and there was no water, there was no strangulation marks on her. That's what I mean. And there was no water in her lungs, so it wasn't from drowning in the canal or anything like that. Then they drain the canal to look for more evidence, and they find a slide viewer, which, for those who are young like me, or even younger maybe, and don't know what a slide viewer is, a slide viewer was used to view photos that were on slides from cameras back in the 60s. And this slide viewer is found in the canal where Irene's body is found. And the police go to the newspaper and they say, hey, if this belongs to anybody, let us know. And who contacts them but a priest from the Sacred Heart Church where Irene was last found, saying, that's my slide viewer. And this man goes by the name John Fite. Now, even as somebody who maybe has wavering religious opinions, especially on Catholicism, I am hesitant, even though he is an ordained priest, to call him Father John Fite, because I believe that somebody that really wants to serve God and serve their community and serve their church would not, do what this man did. They meet up with him. He has scratches on him, but he says he went to another building 5 miles away that was owned by the priesthood, and he realizes he forgot his key. So he scales the building to try and get in. Well, he falls and scratches up his hands. Excuse me. I am so sorry. I don't know why I'm yawning so bad. I am recording this at 10 o'clock in the morning, so that could be part of it, but let's get back into this. So they see the scratches, but he kind of has an alibi for it. And they decide to give him a polygraph. At this time, polygraphs were very, very heavily used. They're still heavily used in a lot of ways, but they are not as hard-hitting of evidence as they used to be. Their accuracy has been called into question a lot within recent years, but back then he failed his polygraph, and they wanted to look into him more, and they find out that a week before, I believe, I think they said exactly 5 days before, Irene was, or went missing, before she was murdered. John Fite had been the priest at another church a little ways away from Sacred Heart. And a college student had gone in to pray at this church during her free period from classes. She comes in, a man puts a white cloth over her mouth, tries to suffocate her, but she bites him to the point where he has to release her and she's able to escape. When she is given a photo lineup of possible suspects, she points out John Fite. He pleads no contest. After this happens, he ends up at Sacred Heart while this is kind of going on. And now he is the main suspect in a murder investigation. For those of you that may not be aware, especially considering religion is a touchy subject for a lot of people, it has become apparent. I mean, it's been known probably the entire time that it's been going on, but it's become a little bit more widely acknowledged that church officials like to cover things up. Of course, there's been some sexual assault scandals, some with some underage girls and underage boys that have happened. And sadly, with this case, it was no different. He was the main suspect, but they didn't have any definitive evidence just yet. And before they could, he was whisked off to a monastery that was supposedly going to punish him harder than prison would. That was actually something that these religious officials had said in their letter, and we'll talk more about that later later on. But he's moved there, and this case goes cold. This is 1960. Nothing else comes of it until 2002. So in 2002, the family decides to try and open this can of worms back up with the cops, because they know that not only do they deserve justice, but Irene deserves justice. And of course, they want to make sure that it didn't happen to anybody else. There's that kind of importance to a case like this too. And it is not made public knowledge about the first woman that John Fite attacked. That is not made public knowledge until the 2000s. I can't remember if it's when the case is looked at this time or when it's looked at again later on. But they try and look for DNA evidence, and Texas Rangers are, kind of hoping that there will be something that is usable and beneficial to the case that they can find on any of the evidence that they have. But sadly, it all comes back inconclusive. And even though they think they have a decent enough argument against Fite, the DA at the time says otherwise, and actually it ends up not being taken to trial at this time. Then we have two major players in this case. The other priest, who I cannot for the life of me remember his name at this current moment in time, but the other priest that worked with Fite at Sacred Heart. And then we also have Dale Tashney, who was a monk at this monastery that Father Fite, or I'm not going to call him that John Fite was whisked away to. The priest actually ends up later on. Obviously, I can spill this can of beans. I can spill these beans because I said this case, even though it was on cold case files, has been solved and there has been convictions for it. So later on, this priest from Sacred Heart will go on the stand in 2017, I believe, and will say that Fight came to him in confidence and told him told this other priest that he murdered Irene Garza. And he even says on the stand that he asks Fight, like, why do you do it? Why did you do this? What was it? And he said that apparently the reason he did it was that when women wear high heels in the church and it clicks on the floor, it makes him anxious. That's what he told the priest was the reasoning behind this heinous crime, which is honestly wild. But the even wilder part of this is that even though Fight told this other priest that he had committed this crime, this priest does not say anything about this until either 2002 or 2015. Because, and when he's asked why he didn't say anything about hearing about who committed this murder, he says that it was told to him in confidence and he did not feel comfortable at the time going against that confidence, which to me, I have a 50-50 viewpoint on this, because I understand as a priest, when someone comes to you in confidence, it's supposed to be one of those things where they can tell you anything kind of deal. And you're not supposed to repeat it to anybody. You're not supposed to let anybody else know that they told you this thing. But at the same time, if someone comes to you and says that they murdered somebody, I have a bit of a problem with you sticking on your morals when there's a family out there that lost a loved one and is wanting to find out why. I feel like that is very convenient and very self-centered to think that your job is more important than someone else's life. I don't think anything is more important than a family finding out what happened to their loved one. Then we have this monk, Dale Tashney, who writes a letter to the cops in McAllen because when Fight was sent to this monastery, Dale Tashney was basically supposed to right all of his wrongs, kind of thing. And so Fight tells Tashney what he did. And he doesn't, I don't believe that he said the name of the person that Fight told Tashney the name of the person that he had killed. But then later on, Tashney decides to look into this, get more information, figure some things out about it, and tell the proper authorities. And he is also questioned on the stand. Now, both of these testimonies, I feel, were very pivotal. Even though there is a phone call between Dale Tashney, I believe, and John Fight, where John Fight says, if you're trying to insinuate that I killed Irene Garza, that is incorrect. I think that's him just covering his ass, to be completely honest. But I feel like I said, I feel like these testimonies are probably some of the most important parts of this entire case and making sure that it sticks. The other thing that became very pivotal was, as it was described in here, the one of the guys says, like, it's not even a smoking gun, it's like an army of smoking guns or something, which he's very correct about. There is a letter from the priesthood that was sent to the police in McAllen that basically said, you know, John Fight pleaded no contest to this one attack. He's the main suspect in this murder investigation. We're going to send him away to this monastery. He's going to be punished more than a prison could punish him. And all that we ask is that we don't make this priest killing such a public spectacle, because it could have drastic political consequences. At the time that this happened, it was an election year for a Catholic sheriff in this area, as well as someone who was supposedly our first Catholic president, John F. Kennedy. And he was also from Texas, so I feel like they also felt that pressure a little bit to kind of protect him and make any part of his identity look perfect. But because they wanted Catholics to be accepted in a political viewpoint, they basically asked the cops to, you know, just wait for the case to go cold and to just not do anything else about it. And at the time, the cops basically agreed to that, because I guess the cops in that area were also Catholic. And that really bothers me. I feel like this is another example of religion being used as a get out of jail free card. And I don't really like that. Some might say that, like, oh, well, it's okay, they're held to a higher standard, you know, they'll be taken care of properly. And if they're held to a higher standard, then they should be punished the same way that everybody else is. Plus some, you know, like, if that's what you want so badly, then let's come up with a solution. So John Fight never admits that he did anything. He is living out his old age in Arizona at the time that they find him and extradite him to Texas for trial. He's very quickly found guilty. Well, actually, I say very quickly, but apparently jury deliberations took a lot longer than they were expecting, and it actually made the DA very nervous that he was going to somehow get away with this. But he was sentenced to life in prison at the age of 86, I believe. And then 2 years later so this would have been 2019, I guess then, or 2017, 2018, something like that. Because I think they said 2 years later, but I could be off on that. A few years later, let's say that. A few years later in 2021, he dies in prison. And that's pretty much good with the family. The cousin of Irene Garza actually talks about how this case being finalized, because she was a kid or not really a kid, but like she was young when all of this went down. And so she's been there for all of the goings on of this case. And so she says that it didn't really hit her until she came outside after the verdict was read and he was arrested. And she sees in her tiny little southern border town that it is snowing. And she was like, this is a sign from Irene that it's, you know, time to move on and start a new chapter of our lives, basically. And I think that's very, very sweet and very touching. But for Irene, you know, at least, I shouldn't say at least, because that makes it sound like I'm saying that it was okay that it took so long, because it's not. So many people did so many things wrong, starting with the Catholic Church and the priesthood and the police in McAllen, basically taking a religious cover-up bribe. They should not have done that. I mean, I feel like I don't really have to say that they shouldn't have done that. Oh, excuse me. I don't feel like I should have to say that they shouldn't have done that. I feel like that kind of makes sense. But yeah. I'm going to word this as thankfully. Thankfully, this case had its resolution. The person was caught and put in jail, even if they only ended up being in jail for 2 years before they died. They knew their entire life that they did this, and that lives with them, and all of the people that he told that covered it up for him, that stays with them. And I hope there wasn't a single day that they didn't think about it. Especially the people that decided to just move him to cover up the crime. But as I said in the last episode, I'm picking cases that have importance or significance to me. This case, while I don't have a direct connection to it, of course, was the first case that made me love true crime. When I was 8 years old, I would go down to my mama and papa's house, my dad's parents, and my papa was always sitting in his recliner watching his true crime shows, and my parents would be like, oh, turn that off, she's too young to be seeing all this creepy stuff, she can't handle it, all this stuff. So he would turn it off, and then as soon as my parents left, he would turn it back on. And I always loved that about him, because he basically still kind of does that to this day, where like somebody will tell him to turn off the TV, and then as soon as that person's not around anymore, he turns it back on. And I love that about him. He's just so funny. But it would be about a year after that I would hear about this case from a different true crime show that was on Investigation Discovery, and I was 9 at the time. And I remember just being absolutely obsessed with this case, because in my head I was like, they know who did it, they have proof he did it, and yet here's this old guy still using his walker to, play with his grandkids, and it's like, that's just not fair to the family. He doesn't deserve to have that beautiful life. And his poor family, I feel terrible for them, because he probably didn't say a lick of anything about this until he was being whisked off to Texas to stand trial. And they thought that they had this, peaceful little life in a sandy state, and then all of a sudden this loved one of theirs is a convicted rapist and murderer. So that's got to be a hard pill to swallow for them. But I was very obsessed with this case, and I remember actually I figured out how to set up Google alerts on my first phone, because I wanted to know when there was any updates on the case. And the day that I found out he was arrested, it literally felt like the best day of my life. Like the trial hadn't even happened yet or anything. And I remember I don't think I've ever been that excited for anything ever. Even since then. And yeah, I got to watch it basically go down. I was a teenager by the time anything really happened with it. I was in high school. But yeah, I was so excited and so happy that the family finally got justice for something that had been weighing on them since long before I knew it existed. I remember talking in like online forums about it and stuff as a kid. And honestly, it pointed me in the right direction for my entire career. And so I do want to, not that this will ever reach them, but put a big thank you out to the family of Irene Garza for being so vocal nationally to discuss this case and bring it to more of a national viewpoint and a national light. Because if you hadn't done that, it might have taken me a lot longer to figure out who I was supposed to be. And so I appreciate that you were willing to share such a gut-wrenching part of your lives and yourselves with the world. And I hope one day I can do for another family what was finally done for you guys, which is gaining justice. So that is episode 2 of DocuMinded. When I see you guys next time, we will be starting a 5-episode connected watch of the Karen Reed documentary. So if that's a case you're interested in, be sure to come back. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe, everybody.